Awesome. Thanks so much, Lori. Perfect. Well, thanks, Lori, and thank you everyone for inviting me to be here today and for showing up, hopefully with your sweatpants and your coffee cups on this extremely cold Edmonton morning. I'm in my sweat, so if I stand up, I'm busted, but I feel like we're all used to that now after so long in the home offices. So I'm really thrilled to be able to talk with you all today about physical activity for individuals living with autism. I know all of you work with folks who are on the spectrum, and I have been working with this population for many years now. It's definitely a passion area of mine, especially I just really love working with those who are nonverbal and finding ways to connect with them and to support them to connect with the community around them. So I actually really find that physical activity is a fantastic and underutilized gateway into a lot of the goals and objectives that we have for our kiddos or adults living with ASD. So I wanted to share some of that with you today. There we go. So I'm just going to very quickly give you a little overview of Equality Fitness and Recreation, where I work now. So you have a sense about kind of who we are and what we do. I'll recap some of the very common literature that informs my practice for sure, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with. I definitely want to take a few moments to chat about the gaps that are within the capital region so I can share with you what I've learned and what I've seen and heard from families, and I'd love to get some input from all of you as well. And then share with you the things that I have that I see on a regular basis, some of that empirical evidence. So what are families telling us? What kind of strategies are working the best? And then if we have time, I have a few quick little 3-minute videos at the end that highlight some of the successes of a few folks that I've been working with for a while now. So just briefly to get through this a little bit. So who is Equality Fitness and Recreation? We basically are a mobile service that does whatever we need to do to support individuals to get active. So primarily who we work with are individuals living with some type of impairment, but we're also in long-term care. We work with newcomers to Canada and individuals of all different types of backgrounds. So what we do, there isn't really a recipe for what we do. I find it's actually quite difficult to explain because it's different every single day. So what we do, what the unique thing about us is that we're mobile. So my garage, I don't get to park in even on these cold days because it's full of equipment. So every morning I load it up with everything I'll need for the day and drive all around the capital region to meet people where they are at. So that might be in their basement, that might be their community, that might be a new physical activity or recreation center, whatever it is that they want to pursue. Our team, we have quite a small team with only 4 of us right now, actually. But between all of us, it's really great that when we get new referrals or we're chatting with people, we can bounce it around between all of us and decide who's going to be the best fit and what are ways that we can combine all of our expertise in order to best support that individual. So a lot of different backgrounds and qualifications. And then one thing that I'm really grateful for is that I still my foot in the door at the University of Alberta in research. So I constantly get to bridge that theory and practice, and one is consistently informing the other, which I'm very, very grateful for. And then have the pleasure of being able to educate undergraduate students as well, mostly in education or kinesiology. So a bit about some of our programs. A big part of our emphasis and kind of where we started was working on getting individuals engaged in the community. So this is kind of that, we do this on 2 avenues, fitness or recreation, but our fitness or personal training. Now this might be somebody says, I want to be able to go to Terwilliger Rec Center, but I need support setting up a program, or I don't understand how everything works there. I'm a little overwhelmed. So we can go in and do that. We can develop that typical personal training program for them and set them up to be successful on their own. I have a lot of individuals, and I would say many of the individuals living with autism that we work with are long-term. So they might go once on their own during the week, but I also still see them weekly. Some people even 2 to 3 times a week. And we'll meet wherever, at whatever City of Edmonton facility is closest to them, or YMCAs. We do the same thing for recreation, and this is something we've really been building lately, where the community tells us what it is that they want to be doing or where they want to go. And then we can take that labor off of the families and do the work of figuring out, now, how do we make this happen? What strategies need to be in place? How do we need to work with the community organization and the family to bridge that gap together so that this can be a successful movement experience? So a big one that we've been at lately is the Leduc Boat Club. I didn't even know that was a place until someone said they wanted to go kayaking, and they are fantastic out there. I have a great relationship with the staff there. Snow Valley as well, Circtastic, the circus school. Like, it's just been fantastic to be able to get to know lots of these local organizations and their receptiveness to working with us in order to create successful experiences for folks living with autism as well. Then, of course, we go in home. So this could be in long-term care, or it could be someone's backyard. So we'll go do stuff at home if that's going to be better for the family or individual. And we do some group programming, but only upon request. I find with group programming, there are so many fantastic people out there doing physical activity programming specifically for folks living with autism that I would rather just refer to them instead of running our own. So we tend to do that unless people specifically come to us. So we've had a group of newcomers say, you know, our girls don't have the physical literacy they need for North American sport, and now they're in junior high and they don't have the skills to make their volleyball and basketball teams. So they think they're terrible athletes and they're quitting everything. Can you support them? So yes, of course, we'll do that. Or the Wild Rose Polio Association had us doing some aqua size programs for them that ended up being water slides and volleyball and all types of fun things, underwater hockey by the end as well. One group program though, oh, that's not the next one, sorry. We also do caring for the caregiver. So families, obviously we have a lot of individuals in Canada who are supporting individuals with disability and chronic conditions. And we really believe that it's important to support everybody around the individual. So we do offer discounted prices for caregivers, whether that's families, spouses, aides. It doesn't matter what their relationship is, but anybody who's considered a caregiver. And then this is the only group program that we do consistently run. And this is my new favorite thing in the world. So it was completely community led. So a lot of the individuals that I were working with had aged out of the school system and are now feeling quite lost and saying that they don't have a place to be social and, you know, they don't quite fit anywhere. And they come do one-on-one stuff with me, but that's just not the same. I'm not that cool that I'm giving them all the social fix they need. So I ended up bringing them all together to try this social group. And they said, well, here are the supports that I need. And here's what stops me from going into social settings. And, you know, I think bowling, everybody said, we got to start with bowling. We all know bowling. So we did. And this group has been tremendously successful. So yesterday actually was our last one for the year. And we met at a board game cafe and did some games together as a big group, and then broke up into small groups so people could do their strategy games or their goofy games, whatever it might be. But we have done things that I never would have thought would be successful with this with this group of individuals. So laser tag, the corn maze, an escape room, karaoke, like things I never would have chosen, but that they're really keen to do, and it's been working. So this is definitely my new passion project, but it's really important to me that they make all the decisions, they choose how it goes, and then I just go in ahead of time and make sure that all the strategies are in place and prep everybody individually as I need in order for it to be successful. So I'll talk a little bit about how that goes and what kind of things I do. So we'll get into a little bit to some of the literature that informs my practice and most of the practice here at Equality Fitness and Recreation. So we know, it's no secret at all, we know that physical activity is important and beneficial for everybody, and it is incredibly beneficial to individuals living with autism. This is so well documented, we know this. Okay, specifically low to medium intense cardio has actually been shown in several studies to reduce stereotypical behaviors. So in this study, they were talking about things like stimming, attention, needing to move around a lot. Not that I would consider that something that needs to always be corrected, but we definitely noticed that low to medium intensity cardio does help reduce those behaviors. High intensity tends not to, and that was something that was fairly new to me until I did the autism exercise certificate. We also know that participation in physical activity increases both behavior and academic performance. Again, so incredibly well documented, which is one of my big pet peeves for why on earth we keep holding kiddos back from recess in school. We do that as a consequence sometimes, or for various reasons. It is the worst decision we could possibly be making, because going, especially outside, and getting some movement is actually shown to increase attention and academic performance in the end. Again, we do know that kiddos living with autism can attain the same levels of flexibility, strength, aerobic capacity, and BMI as neurotypical kids their age. They're just primarily not given the same opportunities. And we do see quite a decrease in strength for individuals living with autism, likely with hypotonia or factors like that. So strength is one that we have to work a little bit harder on, but it's not uncommon to have individuals with similar flexibility, aerobic, and BMI as neurotypical kids. And then we sit here and say, we know this is important. We all know it. I mean, we're all guilty of not always going out and getting our exercise like we need to, and taking the lazy choice or coming up with excuses not to do it. But exercise itself is evidence-based. It's deeply grounded in evidence. And we all know this, but we tend not to give this the credit that it deserves. So we have this knowledge, yet we know that kiddos with autism are less active than their same age peers. We know that exercise and physical activity are often overlooked as therapeutic support. And this is primarily when individuals are younger and we have our emphasis focused on other life needs. And we tend to not be focusing on recreation, exercise, physical activity. But what we're forgetting is that by incorporating this into, whether it's intervention plans or therapy of some sort, or even life in general, that it actually has very, very strong therapeutic benefits that support everything else. So it's a piece that we ignore, but we really can't be leaving out of the puzzle. We also know that there's still significant barriers for families and individuals within physical activity, physical education, sport, and recreation. So these are things that it's important to learn a little bit more about, to ask questions about, and see what we can do to support families to overcome those. So when we look at the literature to go, okay, we know this is a good thing, but we just see that folks with autism are not engaging in it enough, what's happening? Okay, so again, we tend to focus on other priorities like learning to talk, staying on task, social skills, and engaging with others. But then again, we're forgetting that exercise is evidence-based and can actually support all of those things. So we don't need to only be going to speech therapy and OT and ignoring the fact that exercise and physical activity can be another really critical piece of the puzzle. This was a study there's a few studies on this, but this is something that I actually did in a study in 2018 as well, and found it very, very enlightening to learn about the tremendous amount of hidden labor that parents have to go through in order to even find appropriate activities for their kids. So they're worried, I don't want to send my kids to some random activity where in a place where they're going to be ignored, or where their needs aren't going to be met, or they're going to have a really lousy experience. And it's exhausting just to try and find, where are those places? What does that look like? And this trial and error, parents get exhausted to the point where they just don't enroll their kids. Okay, so that was really strong in the literature as well. What happens in school greatly influences what happens for the rest of their life. And I see some kiddos like that now, where they had terrible experiences in phys ed at school, or were even in some cases excluded. Some of my older youth now were excluded from phys ed in school. And so now they just learn to hate physical activity and movement. Okay, so what happens when we're young in school really influences what's going to happen for the rest of their life. And then we talk a lot about these physical benefits, and those are all very valid, but we can't forget about the affective domains as well. So once we start talking to youth living with autism, there's studies that show that they're actually really concerned about getting hurt. Okay, so they equate physical activity with injury, and they don't necessarily see it as a way to make friends and to be active, because everything's always been individualized instruction for them. So individualized instruction works very, very well, and a lot of individuals still want to have that, and that's wonderful. But what I really wish that we could support people to see is that the social piece can really come from that as well. And so you can have that individual instruction and be part of a group with your peers at the same time. So when we look local, now there's a lot of different gaps within the capital region as far as individuals living with autism pursuing physical activity and recreation. And I just want to start maybe by opening it to all of you. What have you heard, or what do you see, or what do you anticipate, if you're not sure, might be some of the gaps within the capital region? What stops us from getting people active?
From my own experience, the weather and cost.
Yeah, definitely weather and cost for sure. Yeah.
Transportation.
Yes, transportation. I see that popped up in the chat as well. Yes, transportation. Definitely. Anything else? Yes, parent schedules. Absolutely. Yeah, so these are all things I think some of those are barriers to anyone wanting to get active as well, whether or not they're living with autism. Safety on the streets, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things going on, and some are in our control and some are not in our control. When it comes to individuals living with autism specifically, these are some of them that I notice are very commonly brought up. So the first one is that people are telling us, and whether that's caregivers or individuals themselves, that there's a lack of opportunities that are actually a good fit for someone to go to, or programs who are actually willing to make necessary accommodations. So to me, this is just because we live in a world where, unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount of both institutional and enlightened ableism. So institutional ableism being, policies and rules and expectations for behavior and actions that aren't really actually conducive to a lot of people. And so therefore, if you don't fit this mold, you're excluded. Okay, or if you can't fit this policy, or you can't follow this rule or pay this amount, you're excluded. Okay, and enlightened ableism being kind of that yes but pattern. So being yes, I know this is a problem, I know this is a gap, but here's all the reasons I'm not going to do anything about that. Okay, so a very common one is, yes, I understand, these doors are broken or this lift doesn't work. You hear about this a lot for physical impairment specifically, but it's too expensive to get that fixed right away. Right? Where in the meantime, there's a lot of people who no longer have access to that space. So both institutional and enlightened ableism are big gaps, or are creating big gaps. Okay, individuals are told they're not the right kind of disabled. Okay, I hear that a lot. So for autism, when somebody has the label of autism, there are a lot of opportunities that are open to them. But I've also even known individuals who live with autism and diabetes, and then they're told they can't go to certain physical activity programs because the staff don't know how to manage the diabetes, right? So you're not the right kind of disabled to access certain supports. Okay, program opportunities are chosen by granting agencies or program leaders, not by the community. Okay, so I know in my time in the nonprofit world, I've seen this happen time and time again, where there's a new fad or a new focus that a government or some kind of agency has, which is great because that comes from somewhere, but maybe that's not actually what the community wants. Yet we're stuck creating programs where the money is, right? Especially in the nonprofit world, instead of really what the community is asking us to do and focus on. So all of those can contribute to not being a good fit. There is this myth, I would say, in the community where if you have someone with autism coming, they need a one-on-one support at all times. And that's just not true. There's situations where it is, absolutely. But that's not true as a blanket statement, okay? And that really does foster relationships with staff and not with peers. So this is something that I hear a lot in recreational centers or programs out there, or the rule in summer camps, right? If you need an aide at school, you need an aide in summer camp, but that doesn't always make sense, because just because you need an aide to support you in learning doesn't mean you need an aide to support you in moving in a summer camp or following directions in a summer camp. And that's putting a lot of the onus back on the family and the individual, instead of on practitioners who can say, you know what, there's some changes I can make that therefore make my space more inclusive and accessible to individuals with autism or other types of impairments as well. And then there's this lack of acknowledgement for the fact that we need to be prepared. We need to prepare individuals. We need to prepare the community. We need to bridge the gap into programs and new experiences better than we do. Okay, so across the capital region, people will just say, yes, our doors are open. Folks with autism are welcome to come, but I'm not going to do anything ahead of time. I'm not going to change what I do. I'm not going to send information about what it looks like. I'm not going to create a social story or some kind of a narrative. I'm not going to do any of those things, because they're not understanding that need to have those bridges in order to be successful. And then just in general, there's definitely a community stigma and a lot of ableist assumptions around autism and neurodivergence out there. So these are kind of more attitudinal things that I see on a regular basis. Now, all of those things that you all suggested, you know, transportation, parent schedules, all of these fit in within these categories to some capacity as well. So definitely a lot of different gaps for us to be thinking about and working to acknowledge. Okay, so I'll share a little bit about kind of our observations and strategies for success. So what kind of things tend to work and are very common in my daily practice. So I can say that I have definitely seen, and again, this is not coming from research, this is just my observations and hearing from families, that there are definitely improvements in stereotypical behaviors when someone is engaged in physical activity. And generally the people who are active 2 to 3 times a week, I hear this from more. Okay, so we have seen individuals who are not nonverbal, but tend to not want to use verbal communication at all, or really any kind of expressive language for the most part, who are now, as soon as we get started moving, they're comfortable with it, and they're blah, 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 the entire walk. Okay, so definitely seen an increase in expressive language, increased social emotional engagement, whether that's expressing their own needs, preferences, and feelings, which is huge. Okay, that they're very open to connecting with peers, whereas at the beginning, maybe they weren't. And a really lovely thing I've seen with quite a few individuals is this increased resilience to change or unexpected situations, which, as we know, individuals living with autism often do not like change or unexpected situations. But I have noticed that once they start to understand, you know, here's the general rhythm of our session, here's kind of what's going to happen. I trust this individual and I know that I'm going to be safe and everything's going to be okay. So if something unexpected comes up, I'm still going to be okay and I got this, right? We're starting to see that happen gradually, but certainly seeing improvements where individuals would once need Ativan and now they just need, you know, a few deep breaths and a conversation when something changes, which is really fantastic to see. Physically, absolute massive increases in movement patterns and sensory tolerance. So there's one individual that I'll show you a video of who has been diagnosed with hypotonia his whole life. And his most recent doctor's appointment, his doctor said that's no longer a thing after working on physical activity for a while, that hypotonia is not a diagnosis anymore. Improvements in dyspraxia, so that motor planning, and exposure to different sensory stimuli. Okay. Another cool thing has been increased interoception, specifically on stuff that's related to movement. So whether that's body temperature regulation and hydration, those seem to be the most common ones. We're not really working on bathroom and food and that kind of stuff, but we're starting to notice some individuals that we see regularly are able to start to identify when they're getting too warm when we're moving or when they need a sip of water. And we're working with families in order to foster that interoception as well. And then just in general, the more you move, the better you feel with it overall. And so we're seeing a huge increase in confidence to try new things. You know, people who are like, I'm never getting on skates or walking on ice ever. This is horrible. You can't make me, are now very open to discussing it, which, as we know, can be a step on itself. or willing to put them on at least, or put one skate on to see how it feels. So the more and more we're involved in different activities, the broader we're seeing people be open to wanting to try new things. One thing I would recommend for everybody is that we need to be always, always, always incorporating body awareness. It doesn't matter how old the individual is, what you're working on, what your emphasis is for the program. Okay, things like body part identification, crossing the midline, general proprioception activities, laterality, so understanding left and right, directionality, those contralateral movements, again, crossing the midline or using our right and left side at the same time, exploring prepositions. What does it mean to be over, under, beside, on top, those types of things. I still incorporate this in every session with everybody that I work with, because it's amazing where you'll realize, oh, we have to go back to that. They're confused by what their knee is, or they know it's somewhere in the lower body, but they can't identify a knee. So when you're giving cues for movement, if the individuals don't understand where their body is and how it moves in space, then you're going to be quite far behind being able to build progress on that. Okay, being outside is awesome. Now, this was a scary one for a lot of people, but this is why our folks were able to keep active during the pandemic, 100% why. Where it came to the choice of, we know you hate going outside for all sorts of different reasons, but you've been stuck in your house now for about a year. So you have to choose, are you going to suck it up and go outside or stay stuck in your house? And everybody chose, fine, I'm willing to give it a shot. And we've had huge success. I'm so devastated is closing, because that's basically my office for about a year. Ice, okay, it's inherently unpredictable, so you have to just navigate with the weather. We can't do anything about it, so you either cancel and very often what we noticed is the whole family will come out. So if you're meeting at a park or in the river valley or somewhere outside, there's always something for everybody else to be doing. So it's a really beautiful collaboration to see the whole family come and be active and utilize that hour for themselves as well. Okay, and then of course, every season has its own opportunities. So doing things like tobogganing, snowshoeing, skating, kayaking, climbing trees, whatever it might need to look like. But being outside has been a huge success. And this is evident in literature as well. So where parents note that being in nature supported their children living with autism's deep interests, helped them adapt to change, supported creativity and imaginative play, and calmed them. Okay, so being outside is generally really positive. And then we know that outdoor play is shown to connect kids with space to live, boost mental health, and results in increased physical activity. So just being outside naturally makes us move more. We tend to engage in more physical activity. This is just sort of a side note. I have a big backpack that I take with me every day. And these are things, some of them a little bit random, that I will never go to an outdoor session without. There's been times that all of these things have absolutely saved our session from going south. Okay, so things like a bag of birdseed, and you'll see one example of that after. A Bluetooth speaker for music, micro spikes for the shoes if we're on ice, lots of Band-Aids. It's amazing what a Band-Aid can do, even if it's not really needed. Tissues, that type of thing. So this is just maybe a little checklist for any of you who are interested in doing more outdoor work. Okay, another key thing to what we do is that the relationship really matters. And we all will say this, but so often we're so busy, we have really large caseloads, and the relationship doesn't get the time to build and flourish in the way that it really needs. Taking that time is absolutely critical. Okay, you have to develop a good relationship and good rapport if you want to have a higher level of success with individuals, without a doubt. Okay, so this means leave assumptions at the door. We all know the quote, if you've met somebody with autism, you've met that one person with autism, right? You can't make blanket statements. I find it really valuable to always ask about interest, triggers, strategies to be calmed down, all of those things ahead of time before I even go in and meet them. So I have conversation points that they're going to be able to connect with, because that first contact time with them is so critical. Okay. We need to go in being prepared to learn, because we have lots of expertise without a doubt, but we are not the experts. So this is something I always stress to students I teach as well, is stop saying the word expert, because as soon as you say you're an expert, you're putting, number one, a lot of pressure on yourself that you must have all the answers. And that's when we actually see in professional practice that people will fake it because they don't want to admit that they might not know something. Okay, so this is, I actually did my whole thesis on some of this. So this is a very, very common thing that became very evident to me, is that if we say expert, we tend to think we have to always wear that expert hat and be the know-it-all. And that's just not true, because everybody's so different, and it's okay for us not to know things and to go into a situation seeking to learn more and bringing our expertise, but not going in to be the expert on somebody else's lived experience. Okay, and with that, we need to be able to listen, observe, and continually be a detective. Being prepared, I alluded to that as well. So there's lots of strategies that families or individuals use. So finding out what those are can be incredibly helpful. So I tend to use narrative procedural supports on a very regular basis. So they might be very simple, like a social story like this. Okay, today I will meet someone new. Those very simple sentences with pictures that explain to someone what's going to happen. With some of my adults, it may look something more like this. So I don't need them every session. We just need them. For example, this time we were switching rec centers. We were always at Meadows, and now we were switched to Terwilliger. So I went ahead of time, took some pictures, and just wrote them in full sentences like we would have a conversation about what to expect, right? Details around, you come in this entrance, this is what you're going to see, and this is where I'm going to meet you, that type of thing. So this is a model that was developed at the Stedward Center in about 2013, where we were looking at that time on ways to get people with physical impairments engaged in the community. So this model, because Bobby Joe, who owns Equality Fitness, was part of creating this, is really what drove Equality Fitness to exist. Okay, so people were saying, this is what we need, this is the structure we need support to transition effectively into the community. Even outpatient stuff at the Glenrose, the rec therapist can only go for so many sessions, and sometimes that's just not enough, right? So we basically use this as a foundation of thinking for how we progress through our own practice. We don't stick to it exactly, but I'll just give you a couple little examples of how we apply this as a general framework, as a base to think from. So that individual and family readiness. Okay, so first things, please scrap the cookie cutter thinking. You can't do that, it doesn't work. So I know we want to, I know it makes things easier if we say, here's a checklist that we all must follow. Here's all the things that must be in place so that everybody can be successful, and that just doesn't work. Okay, so just forget about that thinking and need to approach everything as maybe there's a small pocket of things that are your standard, but you always need to have room to add or remove certain things. Again, that relationship, okay. I find a big thing in that relationship building is to remember that their whole support network needs to be part of this. Okay, so whether it's their parents, their caregivers, and whoever it might be, find out about the family's fears and goals and past experiences, because that's going to really give you a sense of what have they been through already, and where do we anticipate there's moments of higher anxiety than others. And so we need to do what we can to alleviate the anxiety for everybody. And there's a lot of evidence again saying that parents need preparation too. Sometimes the kiddos or the young adults are ready for a new experience, and the parents are not, because they're so scared, or they've been burned so many times in the past, or they just don't want things to flop again. So we need to be preparing parents and caregivers as well as the individual. So it really is a whole family unit that we need to be looking at. And then finding different ways to scaffold for success, however that may need to look for each individual. Okay, and then we look at the community readiness. So when we're going to go into a new community setting, we need to remember, this is kind of my rule of thumb, is that if this first experience flops, it's probably going to be the last. That is just generally what I try and tell myself. It's almost always true. And I'll share that with the community organizations. Is that we need this first experience, first exposure, first trying a new activity to be positive. Now, community organizations, when you approach them with that, they may require some education around autism. They may want some opportunities to ask questions. They might ask you for resources or support. I'm begging all of you who have amazing expertise to please share your resources and expertise with people. Okay, it's going to be mutually beneficial. It's going to be a way that we are starting to change our culture out there, get rid of that ableism that's preventing people from being active. Okay, so please share your resources and expertise, and answer all the questions and be patient with people's concerns. And then learn a lot about what can be modified and what can't. So are they an organization who's very set on the cost? When you know that cost is going to be a barrier for a family, are they willing to have any flexibility? Are you able to negotiate anything? They have that policy about needing an aid. Can that be changed? Okay, another area I see a lot with this is programs that are very much focused on chronological age, not developmental. So you have some individuals who they're just not going to be able to fit in with other 12-year-olds, but they would do really well with 9-year-olds. So is there any flexibility on things like that? Or a 23-year-old who might actually be a perfect fit for some 16-year-olds, is there flexibility with that? So learn about what can be changed and what cannot. For me, I find with this one, I always go in ahead of time and meet with people. And there has been the odd situation, especially for that social group, the youth social group, where I've contacted an organization and just based off their response, I've just said, no, I'm not even taking the group there. That doesn't feel good. They're not receptive. They're very rigid. They don't seem open to having individuals there. That's not the kind of space I want to take this group to. So we'll just choose somewhere else. Okay, and then introducing everyone by name. So I like to ensure that whichever staff are going to be working that day know who's coming in, and I know that staff's name so that we can make that personalized connection immediately. Okay, then the physical environment. So this is where I find some details that I've had to learn through experience are more important than I would have given them credit for. So folks, whether or not they require accessible parking, but families really want to know, where do I park? Where exactly are we going to meet? Where are the bathrooms? What do the change rooms look like? If you're going to a pool, are we using the universal change rooms? Well, are there stalls in there? How do the lockers work? Do I need coins for that? Like all those little details that we probably take for granted can become barriers on their own because they all add to that anxiety that people are feeling about going in. Ensuring physical accessibility is definitely something to make note of. I also note sensory stimuli. So when you go in, do they have a big fan in the entranceway trying to dry off the mats because it's winter, or a big heater, right? This time of year, that's very common. So then I would just send a note like, hey, when you come in the first doors, there's going to be a really loud fan. But then once you go through the second doors, you can't hear the fan very much anymore. Or, are there people often playing basketball in the gymnasium space? A lot of folks with autism don't like the sound of basketballs bouncing, I've noticed. So that's something I'll tell them. Is that going to be a background noise we have to adapt to, or is that going to be something that's going to make this a disaster for you? So really going in and noting all that sensory stimuli in the physical environment. And then taking photos is definitely something I like to prepare with as well. Okay, so I want to just show you, I've talked a lot about kind of what we do. I have 2 videos here. I'll show you one first, and I'm just curious about what you might notice in this. So this is an individual who's been working with me for just over 3 years now. So I pulled together some video clips of year 1, year 2, and year 3, so you can see some progress. Specifically note the coordination is very huge, the confidence in movement, the strength, all of that. So here's one short little video for you. Oh, sorry, no sound. Here we go. Okay, so that's the first video on Jordan. Anything surprise you or any observations that you made there? We're still working on descending hills. That's still a struggle, but definitely making some. The video is appearing as pictures. Yeah, that is how it was supposed to be. Okay, well, I'll show you the second one here. So I'll just, yeah, I talked a little bit about Jordan. We're almost out of time here, so. Oops, sorry. There we go. And this is Colin as well. So he's only been with us. It's the 1 year anniversary, I think today or yesterday. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, trying to highlight for you a few of the kind of see in action what we do. So with both of those individuals, like Colin didn't want to have anything to do with me for the first time we met, the first few times actually, left our first meeting and went to his room and just nothing. And now I could call him right now and say, hey, let's go do this today. And he would come immediately on the spot. And Jordan as well, you know, he's couldn't sit up when he was a kid, extreme hypotonia. Now, and he doesn't just work with us. However, with Jordan, he does do swimming and a bunch of other things as well, which all contribute to it. And now, you know, the fact that we were able to spend his first night away from his parents, we drove to Calgary, went to the mountains for a night, or went to the Calgary Zoo, went to the mountains for the day, and then drove home again was unbelievable. So we're trying to convince him to go do the half marathon walk in Vancouver next year. But that's kind of my goal. His goal is to meet Connor McDavid, but mine is to go to Vancouver with him. So it's just really fun to see that with physical activity as the gateway, we can piece in all these other things that just enhance life and overall health, physical and mental both. So that's kind of all I have for all of you. So if anybody has questions or comments about anything, I'm very happy to hear.
Okay, thank you, Amanda, for that lovely presentation. I'm just going to stop the recording here so that the question and answer period